Hi, I'm Cameron, and welcome back to the Youth Korner Jeunesse podcast. Today, I'm with Luisa, and today we're going to be speaking about our challenges that we face moving into Quebec from another province and country. And we really go back from our childhood, we go back to being an adult today, and we just talk about the challenges we face throughout the different stages in our life. All right, so today we're here with Luisa. So how are you feeling today?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm good, thanks. So if you want to just introduce yourself, because I know that you're not actually from Quebec. So let's just get a little background on where you're from, the places that you lived and all that. So let you go ahead.
So my name is Luisa, as you introduced me, but I'm Colombian. I've moved actually a lot throughout my life, so I would say I'm a little bit from everywhere. Yes, I was born in Colombia, but I grew up, most of my childhood was in the U.S., and then my parents decided to move to Canada for a job opportunity that my mom had. So we moved to Canada, but then I went back to Colombia, and then came back to Canada, and then went back to the U.S. So I've been a little bit scattered between these three countries. So yeah, it's been
a roller coaster.
Yeah.
I can't imagine how that was with making friends and stuff like that.
Super hard.
How old were you when you first moved to Canada?
Canada. Oh my God. I think I was 14 or 15.
Okay, so you were young, but you weren't 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's definitely different when you move at 14 years old than when you move at 4.
Well, yeah, for sure. And you first moved to Canada, and then after you went back to the U.S., you said, or back to Colombia?
The first time. Can't remember.
You're let me go back. And
yeah, it's so hard. It's so much moving, so
yeah.
I keep losing track.
Yeah.
I think it was Colombia. Yeah, that was my first move.
And you were 14, you said?
So when I came to Canada, yeah.
Oh, okay. And how long were you in Canada before you moved again? Was it 5 years?
I completed my high school here in Canada, a little bit, 3 grades, yeah, in high school. And then I did 1.5 of college, and then I moved to Toronto. And then from Toronto, I was okay, I'm out. I'm going back to Colombia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And then, so now you're back here for good in Canada?
Yeah, it's been a year. I think so. It's
been a year. Okay. And how was your experience in high school coming from, you did it here. So obviously there's the French. Yeah. And, learning a new language at the age of 14 or 13 is extremely hard. Like I was saying, it's not you're young and you can just pick it up more naturally. Yeah. So how were you feeling when all that happened?
It was rough, honestly. I spoke English and Spanish from the moment I was born. Obviously, I learned, those are the two languages that my parents taught me at home. So coming here where it's completely French, yeah, they call it bilingual, but is it really?
It's not. Well, yeah, it's New Brunswick. New Brunswick is bilingual. You see stop signs in French and English, and you go to the store and it's bonjour, hi, or it's vice versa. But here it's definitely not the same. So I guess that could be a debate for another time. But anyways, I'll let you continue.
Yeah, you probably have more experience with New Brunswick. I was.
No, I'm actually from Nova Scotia.
Nova Scotia.
So, but there it's completely English. It's not bilingual there, so it's just English. But I, dealt with the same issues as you. So
really,
yeah.
It's definitely not easy, especially had I came here when I was 4 years old, 3 years old, where you're still in kindergarten or you're doing daycare. Totally fine. You pick it up as a kid. You learn languages much quickly. So that would have been a lot easier on me, but because I was 14 or 15, I can't recall. I had a really hard time. I had to go into French immersion school because I wasn't allowed to go into an English school.
Because of your parents, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So even though my schooling all my life up until 14 years old was English, here I had to start over and fresh language, no friends, no nothing. So it was really hard. The first 6 months were honestly very depressing for me.
Yeah, for sure.
Making friends was not easy because obviously kids are not that nice, especially teens.
No, yeah, it's just the age where it's everyone's trying to find themselves and people are either unhappy or happy, and there's a language barrier. So it's okay, I can't communicate with her, so why would I even approach her? All these things. So I can understand how it's first of all intimidating coming to a new place and a new school and all that, and then also the language. It's okay, how can I even express myself or get people to know my personality? It's a lot of steps that it takes. So yeah, I mean, it's not easy for sure.
No, not at all. So exactly like you said, like people
Yeah.
are not as welcoming just because there is a barrier. It's not because they don't want to be like they want to be rude to you. It's really just because how else are they going to communicate with you? And they already have their friend group where they speak the same language, they have similar interests,
Yeah.
and they can talk about those interests. Me, I couldn't do that at all. So
Yeah.
I had a really hard time. Like in my first 6 months. I picked up French relatively quick, I would say.
That's
I think
good.
like 8 to 10 months it took me to like get like a proper French, what we would say like proper, where I can communicate with people.
That's really impressive, honestly. It took me like over 3 years, so props to you.
No, but I think it's the Spanish. The fact that French is a
True.
Latin language, it was like so much easier
Yeah.
for me to learn because there's a lot of similarities in certain words or like the way you like the verbs.
yeah.
Yeah. So it was like a lot easier
Yeah,
for me
for sure.
being a Spanish speaker also. But it's definitely, it was a challenge.
Yeah.
And I had a really hard time in high school. But once I did my French immersion, I guess they call it accueil, like in French. That's what
I
they
think
would refer to it.
Yeah, I think so. At my high school, there was not that option.
Yeah.
In Nova Scotia, in the junior high, there was the French immersion option, but I was already in Montreal when I was in high school, so I didn't have that option. But I was just completely like the French classes. It was really hard. So
Yeah.
like for you with the exams and stuff, like ministry exams, how did you navigate that, and how did you kind of prepare yourself?
Honestly, I don't recall. It's been so long.
Okay, well, at least that's good. Maybe you just don't remember. I don't know.
Because when I was in Accueil, like everything was like all the courses, yeah, they were in French, but I think there was some exceptions. Like we had a little bit more help, but my teacher didn't speak English. Like most of my teachers that were teaching me French did not speak English, so we were forced to like learn French like the hard way. And a lot of times there would be a lot of misunderstandings. Like,
Yeah.
oh, what? Like I don't know how to express myself, and they wouldn't be able to help me either.
Yeah.
So that was like rough. But once I learned the language, obviously, like they put me in a regular class where I was able to communicate with like everybody else. And in French immersion, like the accueil that I'm talking about, you have different ages. So like there's people that are like 5 years older than you, and that they have like different knowledge than you. So like
sure.
learning was like also like really hard because we're not on the same level.
It's not like you can really relate. It's like some people are like way more advanced, or some people
Yeah.
have experience speaking with like, you know, out in the world and everything. So yeah, it's
was-
not easy. Like it's a roller coaster for
Yeah.
sure, especially at that age. Like you have
Super
so much
rough.
to deal with at that age. So on
Yeah.
top of it, of a language, it's really hard.
Yeah. And honestly, like I wasn't great once I went into regular classes because you have all these native French speakers, and then there's someone with a very heavy accent like me. So I had a lot of like trouble, like you would say bullying because of my
Yeah, for sure.
accent, because of like my lack of like better words to express
You
myself.
can express it in like a formal way where other people could, so then it looks like you're like, you know, you're not as smart or whatever. Like at
Yeah.
that, there's so many little things that kids can just like
Yeah.
target you for, you know, and you're like, I know what I'm talking about. I just can't express it properly.
Exactly. Like that was like my main issue. I felt like I'm like, oh my God, like they're gonna think that there's nothing up here, you know?
Yeah, but it's just
not
taking so
that.
much effort to actually
Yeah.
convert it into words for people to understand. So yeah. And did you get like support, you were saying, in high school, like with the French and with the immersion? Like did you ever have like maybe like a teacher that would come in and kind of like help you guys? No,
No, not at all. Like
You're completely on your own.
yeah, and like my school was very like French, like to the point that like there's certain people that would hear me do like the French like oral presentations, and they'd be like, oh, speak in English, we'll understand you better. Like those were some of the comments that were said to me, and I was like, okay. So that would
It's like-
discourage me from speaking French
For
as
sure.
well.
For sure.
And I just loved my English class. I could not wait till it was like the time for me to go into my English class, because that was the only time where I could fully express myself.
Yeah.
My grades reflected like,
You were doing well. You were
Yeah.
proud of yourself. Everything was going good. Yeah.
yeah.
It's not easy. Like I remember I was only at my junior high school in Nova Scotia for only 1 year, and I wasn't in the French immersion, but I had friends that were, and they were saying the same thing. Like it was really hard to actually like, let's just say they were, you know, good in history, but the history class is in French. So like their grades were like, I don't know, a C or a D or whatever. And they're like, I know the material, I just can't,
Express
you know?
it.
And if you want to try to like ask a question in English, like they would get, like denied. So it's like, it's so sad. It's like learning, yes, you don't have to have everything done for you, but you should still have help where you can learn how to like
100%.
answer the question or ask in a way where, you can actually get the answer you need, right? So like, I know it's
so difficult. And I think that puts a lot of pressure on like us that are trying to learn a new language also, because we feel like there's a lack of support. And it discourages you from like wanting to speak French or like learn French or like even going to school. Like there was a point where I was just like, I'm over this. Like I don't want to go to school. I felt really alone. And like I said, most of the people in my high school were native French speakers or like they came from countries like they're also immigrants like me, but they came from countries where they already spoke French. So like you see a lot of African countries have French as a language, so they came with the knowledge. You have people from Arab speaking countries that also know French, so they have that foundation of French
where they can get around.
Whereas me, I started from zero, and it wasn't easy because people would make fun of you, or there's no support, or if you didn't understand something, like there was no resources for you. I would often go to my English teacher, and funny enough, she was like a native English speaker.
Oh my gosh.
So she was amazing because she's like, I have an accent too, like when I'm speaking French. And she now I could say we have the same French level. But she told me like, people are so mean to me, but at my age, I don't care.
No, for
so
real.
she was like trying to help me out when I would explain my frustrations to her.
That's really nice.
Yeah, she was like super sweet. She would tell me like, you're such a smart girl. Like don't let like your grades define how intelligent you are.
Exactly.
Because there's an extra barrier, which is the language,
It's not your actual knowledge or the education. It's just the language, which is like has nothing to do with what you're learning. So and do you find like it was hard to make friends? Like if you...
It was.
In high school because of, you said a little bit of like bullying and stuff. So like you kind of feel a little bit awkward because you're like, okay, I don't know the same language. I can't really relate. Like...
I did have a really hard time the first year, like when I was in Accueil. Afterwards, I started like getting more like friendships easier.
Okay.
Just because there are some like native English speakers, not too many. But like example, they came from like a lot of my friends were actually Filipino, where in Philippines they speak English, so they would be more prone to speaking English.
Yes.
So
you can relate and you can feel kind of like a sense of comfort because you're like, okay, I have someone where I can talk to. They're English, they understand like where I'm coming from. So that's really nice.
But like I said, like because they spoke English, my tendency was to like actually become friends with people that would speak English.
I know. So it's like your space for growth was like, you're like, do I feel uncomfortable and maybe get bullied and learn French? Or do I just, have someone that, can relate to me? I feel comfortable. Yeah, it's hard.
It's hard. A little battle between what to do.
Yeah. And for like the jobs and stuff now, like, did you find it was hard? Like, how did you navigate like going for interviews and all that stuff? Like, do you have experience?
Well, listen, like I am going to say I'm grateful that I learned an extra language just because it's good when you apply for like certain jobs. Like, she speaks 3 languages, 4 languages. That's amazing, right?
Yeah.
But I did lose a lot of job opportunities just because of my accent when I would speak French. Whenever the interview would change, they would do like an interview in English, but then they would change to French. They'd be like, So I would lose the...
just right there. Like you could have been like A+ the entire time, and then they say like, okay, we're just gonna do a little French aspect, and then it's like, I know but it depends. It's annoying.
It depends also like what companies. Like the larger companies, I feel like you'll be fine, but I lost a lot of like example restaurant jobs because of my French. There was one interview where I went in immediately. We started off French, and the interview concluded 30 seconds after it started. So I was like, I went home and I started crying, and I told my dad, I'm like, Dad, it's clearly because of my French, because I interview very well. Like usually my interviews like do so well. But that one started off in French, and they wasted.
They were like,
time.
Okay,
they're like,
I don't want this girl.
Nope.
Oh, it's really not easy. Like it can be scary too, because it's like you have no support on how to prepare for these interviews. Like there's a lot of things online, like, okay, these are the questions people ask you, this is how you should respond, like depending on your job and your role and stuff. But it's like the French aspects, it's like, okay, I'm just gonna sit here and hope for the best. Like it's and there should be a way to like they should qualify you. Like, okay, they know you're not from this province or from this country, you know, so how can we help you still do good at the job while, you know, we help you actually learn language, you know? It's not just like, you can't expect someone to know all these languages, like, just off the bat like this and then make them do their job. Like, the most important thing is getting the job done and making sure you do it well. But if you have the resources, the help to, you know, do it while you're not that good in language, like, it could work for sure, you know?
100%.
Yeah, and it also depends your role. Like, if you're working, if you have a job where it's just, like, online, or you're on a computer and you're not really interacting with others, and you could do, you know, you have all the tools. The company provides you with all the tools for the translations, for all the editing, or the grammar corrections and all that stuff. Like, you should be able, and if you prove that you do it well and they're satisfied, that's fine. If you're working maybe customer service and, you know, want to make sure you're dealing with more sensitive things with the client or whatever, that could be a different story. But, like, depending the role, it shouldn't just be, like, immediate, okay, you're not that good in French, I'm not going to, like, let you pass, you know?
Yeah, I do agree, like, to an extent that, like, it's great. I learned, an extra language, right? But I'll never sound like a native speaker.
Yeah.
And that has eliminated a lot of opportunities for me. And also, like, when you're fresh off of, like, high school or college, if you went to college, like, you're not going to find a job, like, in a big company. It's rare that you're going to find a job in a big company, right?
You start your way up and you find, you know, little local things, or you find something from a family member or, like, a relative, you know,
But these jobs tend to be French dominated, right? So my options were, like, extremely limited, because if I would go for an interview, like, they'd be like, no, sorry.
I know.
It was really hard at first.
But it's discouraging too. You feel like you're like kind of like not worthless, but you're like, okay, how am I going to navigate this? Like, how am I going to grow? How am I going to, you know, I got my education, I got my degrees, and now what? It's like, am I going to find something? Like,
honestly, the frustration was so big for me at a point that's why I decided, like, after high school, I'm like, thankfully, I get to choose my language now. So I went to college in English.
Here, right? In Canada? Okay.
I went to college in English. I did a year and a half, I believe. And then I was like, okay, now it's time for university. But I knew in university, you have to complete, like, your DEC or something like that, like the college.
Yeah, and I was like,
And I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just not going to waste time. I'm going to go to Toronto where everything's in English.
Get it done.
And it's going to be so much better. So that's what I ended up doing. Okay. I got so frustrated with the restrictions here. That I decided, I'm like, Mom, Dad, goodbye. I
got to do what I got to do. I'll be back.
I was like, no, I have to leave. And that's what forced me to move to Toronto, honestly. Okay. It was the restrictions, the lack of, like,
help,
feeling like I belong somewhere.
Yeah, the belongingness. Yeah.
That's what pushed me to go to Toronto. And even though tuition was a lot, like, more expensive, it was the best choice for me. It was worth it for you. Yeah, 100%. Because it was easier for me to communicate with people. Jobs were in English. They're all in English. So I just felt more comfortable. And I felt like I fit in.
It's a less worry in your head. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Here I always felt like I was, like, the odd one out in a lot of situations, right? Whereas over there, I'm like, everybody speaks English. Like, I'm good. And when it was time for, like, I graduate, I was like, okay, I gotta go. Like, what do I do?
What now again?
What do I do? Like, it was just like, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go to Colombia. Let me practice my Spanish, and that's what I did.
That's so cool though, because you had the flexibility of moving back, going to Toronto, you know, and Toronto is, like, super close to Montreal, so I guess it was, like, super fine for you just to move for. Was it like 2 years, 3 years, 1 year, 5?
4.
Oh, 4. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so not too long.
Not too long, but it was great because I had my car. I would just make the 6-hour drive and come back home, like, see my parents. Like, I would come often, but it wasn't, like, I knew that once I would graduate, I'm like, I don't want to go back to Quebec because I knew how I felt when I was younger, and I'm like, I don't want to feel that again.
Yeah, and also it just goes to show how important, like, how we feel can determine how we, like, live our life. Like, you could have, like, a really good, you know, paying job here, for example, but if you don't feel that, like, sense of belonging or whatever, it's not going to keep you.
No.
You way rather be comfortable with yourself, you know, make friends, feel good, like, going out, talking with people, than a good paying job, for example. Like, it's 100%. Just an example, but just it goes to show how the sense of belonging is so, like, heavy, I guess you could say.
It's so important.
And it's very important. So,
well, like, here, what was, like, the tuition? Don't quote me on this, but I guess like it was around 4,000 or 6,000 per year or per semester. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Over there is 10,000. So like you see the difference. It's huge, right?
Like double.
Yeah. So I made that choice consciously just because I knew I would fit in better over there. And
that's what was most important to you at the time. Yeah.
It wasn't the money. Like, yeah, like it's expensive. And I'm not saying it's because I have loads of money. No, I don't. But it's just
you wanted a good experience.
Yeah, I much rather pay a little bit more for me to feel good.
Yeah.
Because I did not feel good here. I didn't feel like I fit, like I belong, nothing.
And those years are so important too.
Yeah.
Like when you're doing your studies and all that, it's really important years. So you want to make sure that if you're spending the money regardless, you want to make sure it's a good experience that you enjoy it, right? So, like now, how are you navigating like living back here? Is it going well? Are you happy that you obviously went to Toronto to get your degree and now you're settled? Like, how are you feeling?
Seeing the fact that I lived here for like a very short period, it was like when I was in high school, that was like the most consistently I've been in Quebec. I kind of lost those friendships, obviously, because when you move away, like you kind of lose touch. So
life happens, you get older.
Yeah. So now that I came back, obviously it's been like hard on me just because I don't really have that many friends here, especially like now at like my age. Like it's so much harder for me to connect with people just because like I don't go to school where you connect and meet people constantly.
And you don't have like the same routine. Like when you're young, you go to school, you wake up, you know, you have your sports, whatever, you go home, and it's the same thing. But when you're older, you might be traveling, you might have children. Like there's so many things that are going on that you just can't have the time in your day just be like, you know, to always meet friends. Like it's
exactly,
you know,
socially I do feel a little isolated here because I feel like the English speaking community here is so small. Yeah. Or maybe it is big, but I'm not aware of it. I think there's a lack of awareness in that aspect. Most of the time that I was living here in Quebec, I did want English services and I felt like I couldn't get them. And another thing, like when I would go to the doctor, I would have such a hard time. And like, let's say I have like 10 symptoms. I would tell the doctor maybe 2 because that's the only 2 I knew how to say in French. I know. And I was like, what? So this time around, like I'm happier 100% because I was allocated now a new doctor and she speaks English and all my medical related doctors like are all English and I'm like, thank God, because now I can express how I feel. Now it's not just like before I used to, and I had to go like to multiple like doctor's appointments because they wouldn't solve the issue. Of course, they didn't know the whole spectrum. Like they just knew, a headache and I don't know, like
you're just sick, like drink water or whatever.
Yeah. Now I can tell them like, hey, yeah, like I feel like acid reflux. I didn't know how to say that before. I was like, something here, and they're like vomit, like in French, and I'm like, no. I'm like, sure. That's what I meant. So obviously they weren't able to help me. Yeah. Because they had limited information because I didn't know how to express myself.
And that's how crazy, like the language, it can just totally make your experience better or worse. Like I'm lucky to have a doctor that is bilingual, so French and English. Yeah. But without that, I would feel like the same as you, like going there and you're like, okay, I don't know if they're gonna understand what I need. Like it's an experience that you should feel comfortable because it's personal, obviously, going to the doctor. So like you should have someone there that's able to like understand you and everything. So that's really important.
Very. And like I think one thing that we take for granted is like how important communication is. Yeah. Because I feel like now I get the services that I needed for like all these years simply because now I feel like English is a little bit more accessible to an extent. Like not fully.
I think there's more talk around it for sure.
Yeah. But I still disagree with a lot that's going on here in Quebec because it's like I feel like it's great like that you push people to learn a language or like you value the French language here in Quebec, right? Yeah. But at the same time, it's like that doesn't mean that you have to eliminate the other one. Right. Both can coexist.
They can still both be here. Everyone can respect, the language they want to speak, in order to graduate in Quebec, for, if you're going to college, you have to take this French exam. So it's like you just completed your studies in your program, and let's just say you went to Vanier or Dawson or Marianopolis, whatever. Those are all English colleges. So all your program or all your classes were in English. But now you have to take this really difficult French exam in order to graduate. So like I was saying, when I was in college, I didn't have to do that. So I'm very fortunate because I dealt with all the hard French exams in high school and all the ministry stuff. So I was like, okay, I'm past that. But then when I heard that new, thing come in, I was like, okay, that scares me. But it's crazy how, like, it's just an extra stressor for those students, right? It's like they're getting, at the end of their degree, and now they have to do this. It's like it's crazy. Like
it's frustrating for the English speaking community because like we're constantly placed in so many restrictions, and these things affect us, like our mental health or like imagine you breeze through college and then you find out you can't pass an exam. So there goes like all the time you invested or all the effort you put into something, right?
Yeah, so, and they probably saw it as like there's an English exit exam is what they call it that you have to do.
Yeah.
So I guess like since we're in Quebec, they thought it was like only normal to have a French one as well. So like I understand their thought process, but it's like, okay.
Yeah, but
I heard it was very difficult. So it's not just a basic thing like can you get around? Do you know your verbs? Can you analyze a story or whatever? Apparently, it was very difficult even for the French speaking people that are was spoken French your whole life. Yeah. So it's just like, I don't know, looking back, I'm like, I'm fortunate I didn't have to do that, but it's sad for the people that are doing that now, I'm
so shocked like that they place such a big limitation because there's a lot of people that come from different countries in the world to come study here.
Yep.
So that's gonna affect them, right? So people are not gonna want to come here because they're like, okay, so I can't get my degree if I don't pass this French exam. And if it's already hard for native speakers, it's definitely going to be like, and imagine like you speak zero French. What are you going to do?
No, it's a whole nother degree right there just to learn how to, pass that exam, right? So it's
unfortunate that they're placing so many limitations on the English speaking community.
Yeah.
Already, like the services are so like limited.
And or you don't know about them. Like they're there, but they're not really promoted
there's lack of awareness because honestly, prior to this last year that I've been living here, I didn't really know like of many English services that were offered.
Four Corners.
Yeah.
It's great. And like what advice or tips would you give students or people that were kind of going through what you were going through or what we were going through in high school, or if it's related to friends, or like how can you help yourself or make it a little bit easier on yourself? Like any thoughts or tips that you have or like that you wish you would have done maybe?
What would I tell them to do now? Like I would just say
it's a hard question for sure because it's deep, it's long, right? Like it could be, it's different for everybody and it depends, your type of mechanisms.
I would say like invest a little bit more time in researching because it's true that the resources are there. I just think we don't know how to look for them. So like nowadays, like if you're struggling, like let's say, I don't know, like anything financial, there's a lot of organizations like Four Corners that can help you in that aspect. You just have to really look for them.
Look for them, yeah.
Yeah.
That, I can agree. It's just like, I feel sometimes it goes with like, not even just the language, but it could be like mental health or whatever. It's just like getting those people to actually go and look for them. A lot of people, they can't even reach that step. So it's like they need the help to actually go and look for them. So like, I wish in school there was like someone that I, could go to that would help with the French, but not just like my French teacher, because that person's grading me,
Yeah.
It's like maybe there could be like at lunchtime there was a thing where you could go and help with your assignments or just kind of like navigate how to get better or tips, but not your French teacher because that person's grading you and it's not someone you want to go to. It's like, like, I don't know how to explain it, but it's just like a different relationship. If there was someone there just kind of actually help you and, you could talk to them, get it all out if you're having like a lot of stress or something.
Yeah.
Like if I'm stressed for my French exam, I'm probably not going to go to my French teacher because if I get a bad grade, they're going to know I was stressed and, all these things. So,
I think like the schools that offered this program, like Accueil, I guess it's like the French immersion.
Yeah.
I think those schools should have more support for the English speakers that arrive. Because obviously like you have a French immersion program in place because they don't speak French, right? So like
it should be a learning process, like a learning experience.
Yes. And they should have like resources that say like, hey, I'm here to help you like in in English.
Right.
So I can make this process easier for you.
Exactly.
I just think the schools and the system should do a little better just to spread this awareness or make the resources more available to the English-speaking community.
Yeah, because it could be a positive experience.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people, they see it as negative because they went through it in a negative experience, right? And it wasn't enjoyable for them. So if we could turn it around, I might have a different perspective on French.
With the right support and resources, like my experience would have been like so different.
For sure.
I felt like I didn't have that. So I was like, I got to leave. But now, look, I'm back here. I'm having no problem communicating with my doctors. I'm not having no problem getting the access.
Yeah.
And like Four Corners exists. And like once I was made aware of it, I was like, oh my God, great. Like now I have access to a lot more resources.
Now you're seeing progress. You're like, okay, this is really good for the community.
It is 100%.
Yeah. And talking about resources, Four Corners is actually offering a integration journey workshop that is here at the Dermontang's Four Corners office on February 23rd. And on February 24th, it'll be in the Beaubriand location. So if you just go on our website and you can see all the information there. It's really for people who are immigrating into Quebec and having issues feeling like they're part of the community, or just facing other things that come along with moving location and coming to a new space. So you should look out for the integration journey workshop. And thank you, Luisa, for your time today. It was a great conversation.
Thank you for having me.
And I just wanted to say a big thank you to our funders. It wouldn't be possible without you guys. So thank you so much.